Welcome, UGIC members. I am Roger Dunn. I work for the City of Orem and have done so for the last 20 years. And today I'm going to be doing a presentation on using dates in ArcGIS. So ArcGIS supports many languages. If you're going to be doing queries, you can do them on shapefiles, personal geodatabases, file and enterprise geodatabases, as well as to a limited extent on ArcGIS Server, ArcGIS.com, and Portal for that matter. ArcGIS also supports computer languages like Python and Arcade. ArcGIS allows you to select a layer by attributes, meaning that when you run a query, all features that fit that query will be highlighted on the map and also in the table. You can also select a table by attributes and get the same thing. Another thing that you can do with SQL queries is that you can create a definition layer on the map so that instead of highlighting features that meet a certain criteria, you're simply showing the features that meet a criteria and hiding everything else. One of the things that's interesting about that is that the underlying table in Arcmap or ArcGIS Pro will also only show those rows. This is different, for example, than creating symbology that does not include one or more values. That will hide the features on the map, but it will still show them in the table. Label classes can also be defined in Map and Pro, where you specify that certain features are labeled one way and other features are labeled another, and the way you make that distinction is with an SQL query. Now there's some Arc Toolbox tools that also support queries. The feature class to feature class tool and the table to table tool have an expression property. And what that allows you to do is only export or only convert features that meet certain criteria to be put in the output data set. I've included here a URL for queries in Arcmap and Pro. The one for Arcmap is a little outdated. You can see that it says 10.7, but the newest version is 10.8. And then you'll also want to be familiar with SQL 92. The ESRI documentation says that file geodatabases support a subset of SQL 92. So if you happen to be using a search engine to search the web for how to do a particular query on file geodatabases, you actually don't need to include file geodatabase in your search. You can, that's not wrong, but you can also search for SQL 92 and that may make your results better. Okay, let's look at ArcGIS Pro. What I've got here is a feature class in a file geodatabase, and I have made it look like a calendar for 2020. The way it should be read is that these features up here represent January, these are February, and so forth on to December. I've taken this file geodatabase feature class and labeled it by the day, and that's a field within the attribute table, and I've symbolized it on another field called isSpace. And if it is space, then I color it gray, and there is no date information for those features. The reason that I did it this way is because I wanted to show you how the queries work and what kind of results they return, rather than doing a query on, say, storm drain inspections or manholes, where you'd have to click on the feature to see if it returned the right information. So this calendar is a good tool. The other thing I did was convert it to a shapefile and put it in the same map, and you'll notice that all of my features where isSpace is true have a 0 in the day, and that's because shapefiles do not support null for numeric fields. The day for those features is simply 0, and so it shows a 0. Now, could I have done a definition query or a label expression to filter those out? Well, the answer certainly is yes. but I wanted to keep those zeros up as a reminder that in shapefiles you cannot have null numeric values. You can have null dates, but they work in a special way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the select layer by attribute tool and do a lot of queries, many of which I've saved on my hard drive. Takes a little bit to load, a little bit longer than Arcmap, but alright, let's use the calendar shapefile. We'll do a new selection. And for all of these examples, I'm going to turn SQL on because I'm going to show you some queries that really can't be done in clause mode, I guess is what it's called. So you'll see here, create a new expression. I'm going to be doing a lot of queries that don't fit this mold. Alright, one of the things that's pretty popular to do when you're searching for dates is to look for a date that equals a certain value. And when you're dealing with shapefiles and you're specifying a field, you can put the field in double quotes and it'll know that you're talking about the field. But modern day GIS software is okay if you remove or eliminate those double quotes. Now I'm testing against a certain date, that's 9/3/2020, so September 3rd, and you'll notice that I have to put the word date in front of it and surround the date I'm looking for in single quotes. So let's run the query and see what happens. Alright, you can see that one feature was selected, and this is the 9th month, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is September 3rd of 2020, and I highlighted that day. Now there's another way to query dates, which I actually prefer a lot more than month/day/year. And that is putting the year first, followed by a hyphen, then a 2-digit month, hyphen, 2-digit day. The reason why I like this is because this format is more uniformly understood across different regions of the world. Some of you are already familiar with the fact that in some countries you put the day first, then slash, then a month, and then the year. Well, by putting it this way, it's very clear to an end user what date you're looking for. I'll run this just by changing the day to the 4th, just so we see a different result set. And you can see that now September 4th is selected. Alright, another thing that you can do is compare. You can compare dates with less than and greater than. I'm going to look for greater than first. Alright, it found September 4th as well as every day that followed that. If I had future dates in my data set, those would be selected too. Now I'm going to do less than or equal. Now the result looks okay, but this is not going to work in every data set, and I'll tell you why. One of the things that SQL uses is, of course, a back-end database, and there are many back-end databases that have a default date value. For instance, some of you may be familiar with January 1st of 1970. That's kind of like a zero date for some languages. Or December 30th of 1899 is a zero date for Microsoft technologies. On the IBM that I use, January 1st of year 1 is a default date. So when you're searching your feature classes for features with a date less than a certain date, you may also want to add other criteria to your SQL statement to make sure that it's greater than some other date. For instance, I could query my data set to ask for a full date less than or equal to this date and a full date greater than or equal to maybe January 1st of 1950 or something like that. Now, shapefile queries also support functions. This function called current underscore date is followed by parentheses to show that it's a function. And when you run it, it'll select the current date. I'm filming this on July 28th, and so July 28th was highlighted. Another function that's supported by shapefiles is the extract function, and I'll show you what that looks like. If I begin typing extract, you'll notice that ArcGIS Pro is helping me by showing me a function that starts with those letters. If I press Tab, then it types in the full function name and puts my cursor in between the parentheses. So I'm going to notice that it only wants one expression, but this is wrong because there's actually 3 words that you have to use in this expression. So I'm going to type the word month without any quotes. Now notice that ArcGIS Pro is prompting me with a field name called month num, which is in my shapefile. If I press space, ArcGIS has the gall to actually type that in as if that's what I wanted to type. So I've got a backspace and just leave the word month. One trick to note though is that if you are typing a word in ArcGIS Pro and you don't want the suggestion, if you hit the escape key, that drop down box will go away and you can continue typing. I had to press escape again just there. Alright, so back to the query. I'm going to use the extract function and I'm going to use the word month as the first parameter, followed by the word from, followed by the field name, full date, that I want to query. And what do I want to compare that result to? Well, I'm going to compare it to the number 9 because I want everything in September. Run. So there you see it. All of my features that have a date in September were highlighted, and that's good. If I had multiple years of data in my data set, then I might also want to add a query for the year. You can do this, for example, instead of saying if the full date is greater than or equal to October 1st, 2020, and the full date is less than or equal to October 31st of 2020. Let me do another function that harkens back to a warning I said before. I'm going to select all those that have a month of 12, and you'll notice that everything that's a space, including December, gets highlighted. Well, why is that? If I look at my table down here, this is my shapefile attribute table, I've got nulls that are highlighted, but clearly that is not what I queried. The reason is because of something I hinted at before, where a null date is actually stored in the database as 12/30 of 1899. So it thinks that those null dates are in December. So again, just something to watch out for when you're querying dates in shapefiles that you maintain. Great. Let's clear the selection and switch what data set we're going to query. I've got the same feature class on SQL Server. You may also have enterprise geodatabases on other kinds of database servers, and if you want to search the internet for how to query dates, then you're lucky because you can include the name of the database in your search. For example, how to query a date in Oracle, how to query a date in Informix, and you'll get loads of examples and thread posts, but I'm going to show you some live examples on SQL Server. So if I want to query the features that match a certain date in SQL Server, I use the getDate function, and again it's terminated by parentheses. I do not want to use full double quotes around the field name because that's just not how SQL Server works. I'm going to run this function and we'll get a surprising result. Now notice that there was no error. I've got a green detail down here, but July 28th, today's date, was not highlighted. And why is that? Well, the thing is that in SQL Server, time is also a part of the date functions. So here's what I would do instead. I'm going to use the date diff function and specify D for days, and I want to find all those features that are 0 days between today's date and the field date. Run, and now July 28th is highlighted. Date diff also can take other values, by the way. So if I change D to an M, and by the way that is in double quotes, and run it, what it will do is it'll find everything within the same month of today's date. So how many months between now and September 1st? 0. So September 1st is selected. I can expand this to a 1 and watch what happens here. You'll notice that none of September is selected, but now only, sorry, not September, July. Now only June is selected. Well, you may wonder, why wasn't August selected? That's 1 month away. And the reason is because this is -1 months away. Now, it's in the future, so you would wonder, what is going on? What's happening? I can't make sense of all this. Well, it has to do with the order of the values in the date diff function. I'm going to move the getDate parameter in front of the full date field, run it again, and see what happens. See, now August is selected. So, you may wonder, how would I select all of the features that have a date that are within 1 month of July 28th forward and backward? And this is what I would recommend. Rather than testing if the answer is equal to something, I would use the between keyword. Between acts as a greater than or equal to sign and a less than or equal to sign, like this, between -1 and 1. You can use between with many other things besides dates. Here I'm using them with integers, but you could also use between when dealing with strings and floating point numbers. So there you have it. We've selected everything that is within 1 month forward or back from July 28th. But we're only looking at the month of the date. So even though August 31st is more than 1 month away from the 28th, we weren't caring about that. We weren't asking about that. We were simply asking if the month part of the date was within 1 of today's date. In this query, I'm asking for a full date that is greater than or equal to September 3rd of 2020 and less than or equal to September 11th of 2020. So I'm going to run that, and I should just get a few results. Here they are. So to use the between keyword, I would say full date between, and I'll leave the and, but I can delete the mention of the other date field and leave my hard-coded date. I'll run that and get the same results. Notice that the parameters used for the between query are inclusive. It's selected the 3rd and the 9th and everything in between. Another function that I like is the month function. This simply gets the month of the date field and returns a number. So here I'm going to select everything that has a month of 4. It's like the extract method that you saw with shapefiles, but month itself is the name of a method or a function rather than a constant parameter. There's also a function for day and for year that return those date parts. Now there's another function which I quite like, which is called datePart. DatePart can extract the day or the month or the year of a date, but it can also extract a little bit more information. So let me show you that in practice. What I've done is ask for date part of W in quotes of the full date, and I'm comparing that to 7. And you can see in my data set that all the Saturdays were highlighted. Since Saturday is represented by 7, that means that Sunday must be represented by 1. So let's grab all the Sundays in my data set. There we go. Now, if I want to grab all the weekends in my data set, where I compare it against 1 or I compare it against 7, but what I'm going to do is use the in keyword and specify the values that I care about, 1 and 7, Sunday and Saturday. And there you go. Now all of my weekends are highlighted. And that's using the W constant in the date part method. If I search for a D instead of a, lowercase d, and run the same query, what it'll select is the 1st and the 7th of every month. Another parameter value you can put is Q for quarter. So I'm going to select all those months that are in the 4th quarter, all those days that are. There you go. October to December. Another thing that you can do with date queries is you can do date math. So in this expression, what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for all of my features that have a full date value that is between date add. Now what is that? That's a function where I'm going to give it 3 parameters. The third parameter is the date that I'm concerned about. The second parameter is how many units I want to add or subtract, and in this case I want to subtract 7. And then the first parameter is what kind of unit it is, days. So I want to subtract 7 days from September 3rd, and that is the bookend to my between expression. The next thing I want to do is I want to add 7 days to that same date. So let's see what this yields. Alright, so I have selected all of my features that are 7 days before September 3rd. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 until 7 days after September 3rd. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's another way that you can do a query without having to do the calendar math in your head or look at a physical calendar to know what range you're interested in. Now you can already guess the ways to find the first day of the month. And there's multiple ways, but I'm going to use the day function. So here I'm asking where the day of full date equals the first. And I got those. But what about the last day of the month? The last day of the month changes, especially in February and in leap years. So how do I get that? In this case, I'm going to use an EO month function. And I pass it the full date field. And all I want to know is if the full date value for any one row equals the end of the month for that full date value. And there we go. Those are selected. So to make this a little more clear, let me give an example. December 1st is being queried. So we're going to see if December 1st equals end of month for December 1st. End of month for December 1st is going to return December 31st. And since December 1st doesn't equal December 31st, that row is not selected. But in these other cases, it is. So EO month can be really good for that. Anyway, when you combine any of these expressions with the queries that you already know how to do, with math and in statements and between, You can do a whole range of things looking for dates that are of interest to you. When did certain inspections happen? You could look for anomalies in your data. If your crew is only working during the week, do you have any Saturday or Sunday data? And hopefully this presentation has given you a lot of resources and ideas of what you can do. Anyway, I'm Roger Dunn. Thanks for watching.